All right. Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome to a brief presentation on voting rights in Florida. Um, Specifically, we're going to talk about what SB90 is doing to voting rights in our state. So
Sure,
we'll
that's
take
right. Thanks, Bernice. And that's right. We want to go ahead and say who we are. I'm Juan Moore, the South Florida Regional Director For Our Future Florida. I'm joined by Bernice, who just got off of the mic in the cam there. Well, she's still on cam, who is from, I'll let you introduce yourself, Bernice. There you go.
Hey everyone, I'm Bernice. I am the regional director with For Our Future in West Central Florida. So shout out to Tampa Bay area. Hope everyone is prepared for this storm.
And we are joined by our partner, Lori Woodard from Broward for Progress. How's it going, Lori? How you feeling today?
I'm feeling good. Thank you so much for inviting me. And also shout out to the folks on the West Coast. Hope that they weather the storm well.
For sure, for sure. No doubt. And we want to jump into the discussion. But before we do, I just wanted to give a brief, brief synopsis to everybody who doesn't know what Senate Bill 90 is or what it was entitled to do. Just if you're a viewer and you can have, if you have access to your phone really quick to the internet or even on the computer, a quick wiki search shows us and it states that Senate Bill 90, excuse me here, the coronavirus pandemic meant in 2020, the US elections had seen high levels of mail-in voting, with up to 46% of voters saying they voted by mail. In Florida, 4.5 million voters chose to vote by mail, with more Democrats voting absentee than Republicans for the first time in several election cycles. And so after Joe Biden's victory, Trump supporters unsuccessfully attempted to overturn the election results. And SB 90 now primarily restricts access to vote, mail-in voting, as well to limiting the ability for independent organizations to be involved in our election process. And so that was just a quick wiki lookup. So that's not me saying that. That's not us, whoever us is, or whoever them is saying that. That is the definition of Senate Bill 90. So it was signed into law by Governor Ron DeSantis on May 6th of 2021. And so just going into the next slide, I want to go into some key provisions before we go into the discussion, but I'll let either Lori or Bernice take over. We could split it by the key provisions of SB 90 and what it actually means when it breaks down.
Yeah, I can take over if you want, Lori. So the first key provision we want to share with y'all is that vote by mail requests have to be submitted every 2 years. So previously, before this law passed, you were actually able to submit a vote by mail for more than one election cycle, and that's now not allowed under this new law. So folks will have to submit a vote by mail request every 2 years. Next, they retroactively canceled voters' current vote by mail ballot requests. So if you, under the previous system, had requested your ballots for the upcoming elections that are going to be going on next year, the midterm elections, you actually will not get those ballots. So it's really important that you go in and submit a request to get those ballots again, because they are not going to be sent out to you, unfortunately, due to SB 90. Next, they make it a crime for voters to ask a trusted friend or caregiver to either pick up or drop off a vote by mail ballot. So I know a lot of people use the vote by mail drop boxes in the election. And unfortunately, now only like a relative, I believe, is able to drop those off for you, or a close relative. It can't be just anybody who drops it off, unfortunately.
Right. It has to be your immediate family now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And next, it includes restrictive provision for these drop boxes I was just talking about. And more than 1.5 million Floridians actually used those drop boxes during the 2020 elections. So they're restricting them even further and restricting the use of these drop boxes.
Absolutely. And they're doing so many things. Like, again, you're going to have to reapply for the mail-in ballot after 2 years. Just so many provisions. But I wanted to just discuss about what it really means. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen here momentarily. I couldn't see the panel guest as I pull out here. But let's talk about what this really means. And so we went through the provisions. We went through what SB90 is. But how did we get here? And what does it really mean? And who does it disenfranchise? And I'll tell you what it does. It stops. It will disenfranchise so many voices here in Florida. People who can't make it to the ballot. People who are out of the realm of having a car or having a ride to the car. There's organizations and things that we do that gather people together to make sure that they're able to either A, be able to get to the polls, or B, be able to vote. That hinders even these processes now. Lori, I know you're on the ground there in Broward. What does that look like even in Broward County?
Sorry, I had to unmute. There's so many things that are wrong with this law. I just really want to reiterate, the fact of the matter is we had one of the most successful elections we've ever had in the history of voting in Florida. Anybody that has been around elections, former supervisors, politicians, anybody in this state will tell you this was one of the most successful elections we've ever had. Safe, secure, there was not the F word there was no fraud involved. People felt, even despite a pandemic, they felt like they had opportunities, and we showed up in record numbers. So the reality is this law was implemented for one reason only. It's a political tool being used and implemented by the Republicans from Tallahassee and Governor Ron DeSantis to minimize the voices that came out. This is only for one purpose. It is to disenfranchise record number of Black, brown, poor folks, everyday working folks that came out to vote. This bill does nothing else but suppress those voices. So the breakdown, if we talk about, for example, limiting the drop boxes. Well, think about this. If I live in, for example, if you think of my county as Broward County, and you think of it like the in terms of the state, it's like saying Miami-Dade, you need to vote in Tallahassee. Or, you know what, if you're in Orlando, you need to go vote down in Miami. Because the reality is it doesn't make a difference if you're in South Broward or North Broward. If you're only allowed to go to one drop box, that's a hindrance, right? Yeah. The other issue is timing. If working folks do not have the privilege of coming after or during working hours, they're limited to nighttime. Well, people have families, they have lives. So by the fact that they are limiting the number of early voting and the drop-off locations, you're hindering folks' ability to get there. And they say that because they have so many hours in the day, it's an opportunity for voices to drop their ballot. But I would submit that because they've shortened it and they've limited the number of drop boxes, they are actually hindering people from voting. And let's be real. Let's be absolutely clear. It is in Utah, and I know because I worked hard to get people out to vote in the last couple of election cycles. It's a thing of pride for people to go on election day. That is something that a lot of people, they don't want to drop it in the mail. They don't want to go to early voting. They want to go on election day because they came from countries that they were led by tyrants, that they were not allowed to have this opportunity to vote. So this thing of voting on election day is a source of pride. But we also know that sometimes people can't make it there, and they can't get there till later. So by limiting these hours, reducing the hours, reducing the number of boxes, we are actually getting rid of some of those what I would say from the Republican standpoint, it's a political opportunity and they're looking at, just like the big lie, right? These are tools that they are using to exclude voices. And for people that are not engaged with politics, they're going to see on the news midday on election day, they're like long lines, they're going to bail out, right? They're going to know that, oh, there's even lines on early voting. Oh, they're going to bail out. They're going to be like, I have to drive all the way to Central Bower to drop my drop box. They're going to bail out. This law does nothing to ensure that more voices are heard for. It doesn't ensure more security. It does none of those things. It was only designed for one purpose, and that is to exclude the voices that are corrupt politicians. Quite frankly, they don't want to hear their voices. They don't want to hear from everyday working folks. They don't want to hear from our community members. They do not want that. It was successful, and that's why they've implemented this law.
Right. And you see other states. Ron DeSantis is kind of following suit from the other states that have taken this strong stance on voting. And let's be honest, it's an attack. If you look at the legislation, there was never any proof of any voter fraud. So when you pick it apart, there's no real reason to have SB90, but for the reason to have one party win and be an advantage. If this was Charlie Crist, I would be on the same show saying the same thing. What the heck is this? What do we have in front of it? And it needs to go. Bernice, you are working hard there in Tampa. What are you seeing in the pockets? What are you hearing from the community about SB90? What are some of the plans that we intend to help combat the information or the misinformation around SB90?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is that this is going to be really harmful on folks' ability to get out and vote in the same ways that Lori was talking about. The other thing that I want to point out is this is kind of similar to the Georgia law that was passed, which I know that there's now a lawsuit, like the Department of Justice is suing Georgia over it. But similar here, where there's a ban on handing out water bottles to people who are in line. So I don't know if anyone has ever done this before. If you volunteered for a candidate or a campaign in any way, usually if you're in line at 7 p.m., you can still stay in line to vote. And, a lot of times people will bring snacks and water just to encourage folks to stay in line and let them know that their vote still counts. I'm sure, Lori, you've done this before too. Well, now that's illegal in Florida. So even giving somebody a water bottle to encourage them to stay and vote, we can't even offer them any small comforts at all.
I would add one more thing that is an unseen risk to all of this. We're going to see a substantial increase to the cost of running our elections. Just think about the process. The process of us, majority of people having the ability to drop at those drop boxes or with the early voting, that minimizes the amount of labor. The fact that we're suppressing those, we're trying to push more people to go vote in person. That means an expanded cost to our system for voting. So we're going to see an increase in the cost to administer our election. We're also going to see an increase in public health risk, right? The more people that voted by mail, the more people that voted by those drop box, we minimize the amount of workers that we had to interact during COVID. So the fact that we're going to try and push more people instead of using those drop boxes to vote in person, I think is endangering our society as well. So we're going to see an increase in cost. We're going to see an increase in health risk. And the whole point of this is it really is to minimize the people that all of these representatives were elected to represent all Floridians, not just white privileged people. They were elected to represent all Floridians. And it's just shameful that they're using these as a tool. This is a political tool meant to disenfranchise voters of Florida. And it's going to make our work harder. But I am resolved, as good organizations like yours are, we're not going away. You're going to have to hear from us. And if that means we have to re-register every single person and get them to do what they need to do, by God, you better believe we're down for that. We will take that on.
Most definitely. I'm down with you for sure. We will definitely be, if we have to do it, we will be there every year to make sure everybody is re-registered. Let me say this too. I was listening to you speak, and you mentioned the health prices. I mean, we're talking about the same guy who didn't even sign off on the American Rescue Plan. So we want to make sure that you guys know, as viewers, that there has been a lot of inactivity, even though we've been in such busy times, and in every one of our regions and every one of our sectors. our governor has taken a lot of inactivity when it comes to our lives, our livelihood, our safety. This is not just with the American Rescue Plan, the American Jobs Plan. When are we going to be able to have our governor be on board with the people's voices? And this is a flagrant example that just shows that hey, if you're not on my path of what I consider greatness, if you're not in that upper echelon, then hey, we could do without you, and that we know is not true. We cannot have that in our government body for sure.
Yeah, I want to add, I know Lori talks about the increased cost of running our elections, but I want to add, I don't believe there's a supervisor of elections in the state that supported this law.
No, none.
Because it's going to make their jobs extremely harder.
That's right. I agree. Yeah, all of the supervisor elections that I've heard from are very much against this. And the other thing to note in this is, a lot of people are looking to the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act to kind of right this ship. But just to point out, in the state of Florida, we still have 2 senators that are looking the other way with this issue of voting rights. Senator Rubio and Senator Scott are still ignoring the call by people asking for a standardized system to our voting. And Senator King out of Maine has said, listen, we have same-day voter registration. We have long extended early voting. We have, drop boxes everywhere. And we actually have an increased involvement of citizens who are voting. We don't have any problems with fraud or anything like that. When you open it up and allow the people to do when they can, when it's right for them to go vote, and you give them all these opportunities, you're emboldening democracy. The fact that they're trying to quiet all of our voices is really on the edge of authoritarian. They do that in Russia. They don't want people to vote. They do that in North Korea. They don't want to hear from them. Well, we're not those countries. We are the United States of America, and we are founded on the belief that our vote is a voice towards representation that represents all of us. And we have a big problem, not just with DeSantis, but Rubio and Scott, that are not even listening to the people on the voting rights. And I would submit that, and I heard this from a former supervisor of elections who said that, if you look at the detail of the For the People Act, or what has worked, a lot of it actually stemmed from Republicans in Florida. The history, if you go back through the history, the extended early voting was implemented by the Florida legislators who were predominantly Republican. The mail-in ballot system that we have was implemented here in Florida by Republicans. So guess what? All of these things that are now in here that we're looking to standardize across the U.S., they worked well. Well, apparently too well, because Republicans are not liking the number of folks coming out. And that's a problem. So now they're trying to undo all of the things that they had implemented over the past few years. And our governor, what he did is basically implemented an add-on to the big lie. Listen, make no mistake, they're doing this because they believe it'll work. But we, as organizers and as community members, we also know that you can throw whatever you want at us. Bring it, Ron DeSantis. Because you know what? This mom and other moms, we're going to get the hell out of our neighborhoods. We're going to knock on doors. We're going to talk to people. You are not going to take our vote away. You are not going to take our right away. You want to undo that I have to now ask for a mail-in ballot every 2 years or instead of every 8 years? Fine. I can deal with that until I vote your blankety out. And we replace you with somebody who goes back to empowering the people. We just, these leaders have to go. And it's just shameful that when folks really learn what is happening, they realize, listen, they're not on my side. They're not really doing anything to help us. The reality is they are trying to exclude your voice. They don't want to hear from us. They do not want to hear from us. Yeah, and they sure as heck don't want us voting.
For sure. And then by the time we recognize what's going on, it's too late, often so more than not. What were you saying, Bernice? I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was just agreeing with everything that Lori said. It's unfortunately like this is a voter suppression law. It's not designed to help make our elections better. It's designed to help decrease turnout. And our governor doesn't want us to be voting.
Yeah, and the one you mentioned in the opening, Juan, about trying to minimize the amount of expenditure by organizations doing voter registration and petition gathering to, I think it was $3,000 expenditure. The good news is Supreme Court of Florida has already squashed that. That's already been chucked out because it was unlawful. It really was unlawful. And then, the other thing that none of them have addressed, and really to our point here, which is the biggest issue of all, is the hidden money that is corrupting Florida's election. The hidden donors, these dark donors, are corrupting our system. And why would you not, if you're going to take the time, go up to Tallahassee and have a legislative session and address election issues, you should be first and foremost looking at dark donors. That should be your number one issue, because it has corrupted Florida elections. We just saw that Senator Jose Javier Rodriguez lost by less than 50 votes in South Florida because a dark money went into a campaign for a rogue candidate. So that is really the problems that they should be working on. Instead, they're looking at creative ways to disenfranchise folks. And for anybody that's listening, it's not just a matter of we have a job to do to get more people interested and understand. You've got to, request your vote by mail early and get your neighbors doing that as well. But we also have a big fight coming in with the redistricting. This is a huge deal that's going to be hitting us, because not only do we see what they're willing to do during session, which is take our votes away, we know now they're going to start carving out, which they did 10 years ago. I am sitting in one of two seats, if you will, in one of two counties in the whole U.S. that was flipped because the Supreme Court said, yes, you gerrymandered Florida and you have to undo that. And so thankfully I fell into Alcee Hastings, rest his soul. It went back to him. But the reality is they did it 10 years ago. I make no mistake, they'll try and do it again. And we need good folks showing up and holding them accountable and saying, no, you cannot do that. You are not allowed to pick your voters. That is not acceptable.
It's not. It's absolutely not. And I love the way I absolutely love working beside you and in the field with you. What are some of the things that you're doing, Lori, organizationally, that's coming up this week, this month, that people could tap into tonight to have their voices heard against these issues?
Thank you. Well, one of the things that we're doing is, which I think is what you guys are doing as well, is we constantly have to remind people, hold your leaders accountable. I think the biggest danger that we have facing Florida, and I had this conversation with some folks yesterday, I think the biggest threat, if you will, is the fact that people are becoming, feeling powerless. They're getting to a place, if we look at the over 20 million that are living in our state, and half of those are voters, there's a huge population out there that right now they're like, oh, I don't want to send a letter to my senator. It's not worth it. Like, it's not going to make a difference. I'm not going to contact the governor. It's pointless. That is the biggest danger that we as a society face. And I'll tell you why. Because at the point where the majority of the population has given up on leadership, we are not a democracy anymore. We really aren't. And while I know that our letters and phone calls and all that may or may not sway the governor or the senators, we still have a job as a citizenry to hold them accountable. And by doing what we're doing here, we're reminding those people that are watching, listening, and all that, we're here to hold you accountable. The less voices that are doing this, it becomes very dangerous. And that's what I see is very dangerous. And so continue doing what we're doing, which is being vocal and loud and holding them accountable. So last week we did that. A whole bunch of us went into the senators' offices to deliver letters in Miami, Orlando, Tampa, and Tallahassee. And we drove a letter campaign, phone campaign. We're still doing the letter campaign. We're still urging people to call in and all that. And obviously, we're going to continue to support people re-registering and pushing those endeavors out. That'll be starting for our organization because we're still on advocacy. It'll probably be September when we'll start doing more of the get out the vote and all of that with folks. But I think for the everyday person is just to understand that, you know what, I get it. Politics is a lot, right? And people are like, oh, politics or whatever. But I would say to you is you have to look at what is affecting your family. And right now, when I look out my front door, I know that I've got environmental issues. There's water issues. They were just there last week, electrical. We've got a storm happening. There are so many things that other people are making decisions for my family. They're deciding how much my electric bill is, how much my water bill is, if I get emergency services. They are deciding that for me. Well, my job as a citizen is to hold them accountable if they're not representing. If they're only representing their wealthy, their wealthy donors like Rubio, Scott, and DeSantis, that is not acceptable. I am not going to allow you to steal from my family. And that's in some ways they're doing. They're stealing our resources. So our organization will continue to be loud, continue to be vocal, continue to pull as many people in as we can, and really encourage people to look at what it means for you personally and have that conversation with somebody else. Because a lot of times in this space, and that's why I think we've been so vocal, is a lot of times the Dems, if you will, are just about, well, just register to vote and get out the vote. Well, you have to give people a reason to do that.
Right, absolutely.
If they don't trust you, then why are they going to go vote? So I feel like you have to talk to us about our community and what is important to us. So we'll do those things in addition to our usual advocacy. And I think I've invited you on, come out with us, fight it, ICE Miramar. We're having that battle every week. Can we give immigrants water? No, you can't. We're going to continue those types of things. Because that's what we should do. If you care about your community, you show up and you support them and you help and you find a way instead of hiding, which is what Rubio, Scott, and DeSantis are doing.
And they do it very well. They do it extremely well. Thank you so much, Lori, for that. Bernice, I don't know. I know we have some good things, some great things coming up. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about what you have going on in Tampa, and also the BFF program would be great to let people know about.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm really excited about the day of action that we're having here in Tampa on July 17th. We are going to be going out into the community and talking to folks about the American Jobs Plan, and specifically talking about how environmental policy is going to be changed incredibly by this plan, and the investments that it makes into clean energy as well are really exciting. So we are getting ready for that. And just in general, looking forward to ramping up as we get closer and closer towards holding Rubio and Scott accountable. We are building up our volunteer program so that we can be prepared and have the numbers that we need in order to get rid of Rick Scott and Marco Rubio.
For sure. And what that means for us here at Far Future, that volunteer program is going to be an extensive program that we have been building for like the last 3 months. We're still building on it, but we will be able to train you to harness every skill that you have. You just don't have to phone bank. You just don't have to text bank. Well, we want to be in your face, basically, like Lori said. We don't want to pander you and ask you to go get out and vote on the gubernatorial one. I want to be at your picnic, your barbecue, at your event. If it's a progressive movement, we want to be there to support it. So we have started this BFF program. It's the premier program to volunteer in, if I must say. So please, if you guys do have any links that you want to put up, Lori and Bernice, we can definitely put it in the chat for the viewer. Other than that, I'll leave with this here. We have so much to fight for and so much to fight against. And so it's in your due diligence to at least know what's going on around you and what is for you and what is against you. And so I just encourage everybody, like I do on every one of these, is to, when you reach out and do try to touch somebody, keep reaching out with your eyes closed and your heart open. For sure.
Great message.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Lori.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, guys. You guys are great. And I will see you guys very soon.
Bye, everyone.
Later, Gators.